Now, let's begin with our first panel. Our first panel is dedicated to NIS Directive and NIS2 Proposal. I'm inviting my dear colleague Adam Botek on stage. Adam is also part of International Organizations and Law Unit, and he is going to be a moderator of this panel. This panel is hybrid, it has hybrid format, and we are going to be joined by representatives from European Parliament, European Commission, and the National Cybersecurity Agency of France. One last thing, we would be extremely happy for your contribution. For your questions, we can ask to our panelists. So for that, we use Slido application, #CyberCon, and a slide reminder for everyone, including me. The Wi-Fi is called CyberCon 2021, and its password is NUKIP 2021. So thank you. Adam, floor is yours. Enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. I hope that this mic works as well. Before we will dive into the panel debate, I would like to briefly introduce the topic too, so that we have a better understanding of what we are going to talk about. After that, I will introduce my guests, and we'll have the debate. Just a couple of seconds, I will need to call them, to invite them, so that they can see the presentation too. Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. Sorry
Hi.
for the delay, but we are already starting. And before we will have the debate, I will briefly introduce the NIS framework and the changes that NIS2 brings to it. I will have a short presentation. I will try to share my screen. Can you see the screen? Just a quick question. No, okay.
And we see a little bit of a PowerPoint, but not too much.
Okay, now you should see that.
Yes, we now do.
Yes, okay, perfect. Perfect. So, just to briefly introduce the topic.
Sorry, can I just quickly ask if you can see and hear me? Because my VPN is super slow today.
Sorry, Benjamin?
I just wanted to know if you can see and hear me.
Yes, we can hear you well, and we can see you as well, so it's fine.
Okay, because my VPN connection is very slow today.
Okay, but it works fine, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Okay. So to start, I will briefly introduce you to the NIS Directive Framework. It was adopted in 2016, and the NIS is directive. That means that it sets goals, but how to reach the goals, it's up to member states, and it has three main pillars. The first one is national strategic frameworks. And the NIS says here that all EU member states must have national strategies on cybersecurity and must appoint authorities responsible for cybersecurity. The second pillar is regulation, and here the NIS says that EU member states must identify entities, and those identified entities then must implement security measures and report incidents to the authorities appointed by member states. And the third pillar is cooperation and information exchange between member states And here, the NIS Directive established the cooperation group, which serves for exchanging information on implementation of NIS Directive, and also TC Network, which serves for sharing more technical information and for contact of TCERTs in the European Union. The NIS2 proposal, it has some changes that it wants to introduce to the NIS framework. The pillars remain the same, but there are some significant changes. And regarding the first pillar, for example, there are not only the strategies that the member states have to have, but also some specific policies like CVD, the Coordinated Vulnerability Disclosure, which means that if a researcher finds a vulnerability in a product, then he has a chance to report it to the vendor of that product. But sometimes it doesn't work very well. What NIS proposes is that there should be someone who interconnects the researcher and the vendor for that process to be safe for the researcher and for that process to actually lead to patching the vulnerability in that product. And it also says that member states have to have cyber crisis management policies and more. I will not run into details because that's what I'm expecting that my guest will do. But just to give you a brief introduction. And regarding the regulation, there is a significant change in how the entities will be identified according to the Commission proposal. Now it's a process of identification of national authorities that have to say, okay, you are important because of that reason. And what Commission proposes is that it should work automatically, so that you are big enough, let's say, you have many employees and you have a big turnover, so you are going to be regulated. And it lowers the administrative burden, but doesn't reflect criticality that much. And what is proposed here as well is that there are going to be more sectors in the scope. And another interesting thing is that the top management should be accountable for not doing the cybersecurity well. Okay, and on the third pillar, I will not run into details here. Again, just to say that there are going to be another mechanisms for member states to share more information, share more experience, and also the ENISA, the EU cybersecurity agency, will issue a report on cybersecurity in the European Union. Okay, this is the brief introduction. I will now introduce my guests, and then I will ask them a few questions to kick off the debate, and then I would like to ask you to ask your questions as well, and refer to some panelists or have a more general questions. It's up to you, but please use the Slido that my colleague Carolina described. Okay. First guest I will like to introduce is Alisha Müller, who works as policy advisor to member of European Parliament, Bart Grotius. Sorry for the wrong pronunciation, and she advises on industry, energy, and cybersecurity, of course. And nowadays, most of her working hours is spent on the NIS2 proposal, so she advises Bart on the file. And before joining the Dutch delegation for the Renew Europe, the Liberal Party in the European Parliament, she worked in the Dutch Parliament as well. Next guest is Muriel Boix, who works as a policy officer in the International and European Affairs Unit in the French Cybersecurity Authority, which is some kind of a counterpart to NUKIP. And her unit is responsible for the negotiation of EU legislation and, of course, the NIS itself too. So she's part of a team that creates the position of the French delegation on the NIS file. And the last guest is Benjamin Bögel, who works as a policy officer in the cybersecurity policy unit in the European Commission. This unit is responsible for the cybersecurity files and also for drafting the NIS2 itself. So he was a part of a team that basically created the NIS2 proposal. Before, he also worked as a policy advisor to a member of European Parliament. Okay, and let's start the debate. I will have 2 questions on my panelists to start with. The first one is, where do you think that the NIS2 brings the most of its added value? And the second one is, and on the contrary, where do you see a room for improvement or adjustment of the NIS2 proposal? But of course, this second question cannot be, or doesn't make any sense to address it to Benjamin, who is part of the Commission team drafted the NIS2. So I will have an extra question for him to begin with, which is what were the main drivers for updating the NIS, and is there any underlying philosophy behind the move of the European Commission to update the NIS directive? Okay, Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. So thanks a lot for having me. So maybe I should start with a bit with the background. When the first NIS directive, which is currently in force, was adopted in 2016, it was basically a greenfield legislation. It was the first piece of EU legislation in the field of cybersecurity, and before that there were basically no EU requirements for the member states in the field of cybersecurity. And I mean, you've already presented the 3 pillars of the directive, and I think it's safe to say that the directive has been a success so far in all 3 pillars, because it has led to real improvements on the ground. So in the member state capabilities pillar, we've seen that member states, they have either for the first time ever created cybersecurity agencies, or they have increased the staff of the agencies and the capabilities of the agencies that were already in place. So that was already quite an improvement in our view. And as regards the second pillar, the cybersecurity measures that companies need to take in order to become more resilient against cyber attacks, we've seen that the member states, they have identified a lot of companies that fall now under the scope, thousands of companies across the EU actually. So there is actually a specificity. I mean, Adam already explained it. Under this piece of legislation, companies are not automatically in scope, so they don't automatically have to take measures, but the member states, they first identify the entities that have to take the measures. This is very unusual under EU law. It was in a way an experiment. And it has led to the identification of many companies that are now taking cybersecurity measures and reporting incidents. And we've also seen a sharp increase in cooperation between the member states thanks to this law. So member states have started exchanging information on cybersecurity policy, but also on incidents. So we are quite happy with the first NIS directive. Nonetheless, we've decided to update it, to revise it. And this is for two reasons, I would say. First of all, it's only 5 years maybe since the first directive came into force, but the cybersecurity landscape has changed a lot in these 5 years. And not just with COVID. I mean, COVID is just the latest development, which has led to a sharp increase in digitization in companies. I mean, you all know it, we are all teleworking now. I mean, probably many of you are also remote studying now. So this, I mean, we've seen a lot of digitization in recent years. But we've also seen an increased dependency of companies between the sectors. Companies become more and more dependent on one another in the field of technology. For example, there are more and more companies that are using cloud services within their own service provision. Then we've seen a lot of supply chain challenges. You've, for example, heard probably about the debate on supply chain in the context of 5G. But we've also seen either completely new technologies appearing or rather technologies being rolled out more widely. So, for example, on the internet, we now have a new digital infrastructure, the content delivery networks. They were already around 5 years ago, but they played a much less significant role, while, for example, today, 50% of internet traffic flows through the content delivery networks. So these are all developments that we want to take into account, and these are main reasons why we are updating the directive. And secondly, we also want to fix certain problems that we've witnessed with the first directive. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I've already mentioned the specificity that member states have to identify manually the companies that fall under the scope. And we've seen that this is not done consistently across the European Union. So there are some member states that have identified 5 times more entities per capita than other member states. We've seen certain countries not identifying any entities in certain sectors, such as, for example, health, while other countries have identified a lot of entities in these sectors. So these are problems that we want to address. Other problems are, for example, that the time when the deadline until which a company needs to report an incident varies greatly between the member states. So there are some member states where you can report the incident until 72 hours after you've taken note of the incident, and other member states require you to do that within just 1 hour. And we think this is a problem also for cybersecurity, because the sooner you report an incident to the authorities, the earlier they can help the company that is reporting the incident, but the earlier they can also evaluate whether this incident has a broader impact on the wider economy. So yeah, there are we've identified many more problems, but I would say these are the main ones, and we want to address them with the revision. Maybe now on to question 2. You've asked me, Adam, where do you think that the NIS will bring the most of its added value? We feel that it is the extension of the scope. So under the current NIS directive, companies in 7 sectors had to take measures. These are the energy sector, the transport sector, banking, financial infrastructures, the health sector, drinking water, and digital infrastructures, and certain types of digital service providers, such as cloud providers. So, we propose to extend the scope to many more sectors, such as manufacturing, but also the public administration in the member states. And as I said, to new types of entities, such as the content delivery networks. And we feel that this is very important because the old directive was based on the logic that there are sectors that are highly digital and highly relevant to the economy, and sectors that are not so digital. But this is no longer the case. Today, everyone is digital, and this is why we want to cover everyone. So this extension, I think, is very important for us. Secondly, we want to abandon this approach of manually identifying companies that have to take measures, and instead we want that all companies in these sectors that I've just mentioned all companies that are at least medium in size or larger, so small companies excluded, that all these medium and large size companies have to take these measures automatically. This will, of course, lead to an increased burden on the authorities that have to supervise, the national authorities that have to supervise these entities, but we think it's worth it because it will lead to a dramatic increase in cybersecurity. Because we do know that many companies, even though they know that they should take measures, just don't take the measures. And if we require them to take the measures, we expect a much higher level of cyber resilience in these companies. Yeah, and thirdly, we want to include, I already mentioned it, we want to include public administration in the scope. We feel that this is very important because we see that not all public administrations are well protected across the EU. And we've also witnessed many security incidents recently that involve public administrations and that have led to downtime of important public services. Finally, we want to harmonize the rules that the requirements that companies have to take. I already mentioned it in the beginning that now at the moment some companies they can report within 72 hours while others have to report within just 1 hour. And as I said, this is a problem for cybersecurity, and we think that harmonizing these rules will lead to an improved cybersecurity as well. So that's it from my side.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now leave the floor to Muriel, if you want to comment on the things that are good in the NIS added value, and also the improvements you would like to introduce from your French perspective.
Okay. Well, first, thank you to virtually invite me to participate to this conference. I'm very glad to be part of this panel. This is my first panel since I joined the cybersecurity agency, so it's quite new, and it's very pleasant to see you, and hope so that we will see each other in person next time. Well, there is a lot of things that has been told now. Just maybe to have a step back to understand why this is important to have this NIS2 directive. We need to understand the threat level, because tensions in cyberspace are real and sustained. And there is an ongoing growing sophistication and professionalization of cyber criminal realm. And this poses a threat to our critical infrastructure, but broader the private sector. So we think there is also an increase of the attack on the supply chain. And this is not now the exclusivity of sophisticated threat actors, but also for familiar cyber criminal. And well, we think that it is very important to have this broader approach. So what I will kind of present now, this is how ANSSI in France received this proposal. This is one point of view of an EU member state. And in this context, we think that what our colleague just presented, this is a change of philosophy. The idea is to make the NIS2 directive as a mass cybersecurity law. And we think that this is a much welcome step to do so. We are very supportive of the Commission proposal. We think that there will be, of course, major consequences at the national level that must be anticipating. Benjamin raised the fact that there will be an increased burden for our national competent authority. We are well aware of that, but even though we think that this is something we need to put to implement, and this is something that need to be future-proof, and it is in the enlarging the scope that we will raise a higher level of resilience of how all the private sectors and public administration. We think at the NC that the threat levels leave no choice but to regulate this large scope. But we consider it as an economic opportunity on our side to develop the cybersecurity ecosystem. As national competent authority, we know that we won't be able to supervise all the scope proposed by the Commission, but we will rely on the private sector to implement some of the NIS2 requirements, and we think that we need to prepare ourselves now. This is not something new. We knew that NIS2 directive had to be revised. We knew that due to the level of threat, it will be different from the first one. And well, we've got some time until the final implementation at the national level, and I think, and ANSI think that it lets us some time to accompany the private sector to develop and creating the necessary conditions for the emergence of such a companies capable of accompany the private sector. But nevertheless, the National Competent Authority will have the opportunity to continue its work also with the most critical ones, as the ANSI is already doing right now. But we think that we have some now experiences that we can share with the private sector and deliver, all the lessons learned from these past years. So this is how we think that the NIS2 directive can be an improvement for at the national level in our views. Also, another area where there has been considerable progress is the crisis management. We raised the topic here, but the NIS2 directive comes to consolidate these efforts, notably through the formalization of the National Crisis Management Framework and its European counterpart, EU Cyclone. I don't know if you are quite familiar with the EU Cyclone, but this is the Cyber Crisis Liaison Organization Network. It gathers high-level executives of the 27 member states competent authority in charge of the crisis management, and the Commission and the NISA, of course. This is new, and it builds some strong coordinations with the CSIRT network to better deal with the future large-scale incidents. NIS2 directive comes to introduce more concretely and in the law, let's say, this new cooperation group. And we are very glad to see that the NIS2 recognized the work that has been doing first in the NIS cooperation group, but after that with the creation and all the meetings that have been held these past years. We believe that this is a solid base, and it's time to trigger a dialogue on solidarity and mutual assistance in case of a large-scale incidents at the EU level, from the technical level to the political one. And this is something that will be part of our priorities as a French presidency. Also, continue the work on the NIS2, of course. But this is one of our main priority. But the other one will be to continue on the solidarity. This is something very important at the cyber level, and we saw some improvement, but we need to adjust all the different levels to have a better communication and cooperation between all the different groups. Since we believe that the Commission proposal addresses many of the current challenges, we don't have much to tell on what will be the room for the improvement of the NIS2 directive. But in our point of view, there is a room actually to better secure the supply chain. This is something that is not new. We just read the topic on the supply chain attacks before, but we think that this is something something with comes with the fast digitization and complexification of the value, the chain value. And that has led to a situation where more and more companies jointly contribute to deliver a single digital service. ICT service providers, sometimes known also as the managed service provider, but we have a conception that it is more broader than just the MSPs and themselves, represent the new level to be secured. The idea is to introduce and better secure this all these actors within the directive. We hope that we will manage to capture all these actors by introducing like new categories and sectors within the directive. But we consider that the NIS2 is an opportunity to regulate these actors, since there are no capture yet in any EU legislation for now. Well, with the current situation, there are some actors that we cannot let apart from any EU cybersecurity law. So this is something that we consider to be very important for the coming months. We hope that we will have the possibility to have some improvement on this side, but this is the only thing that we consider to be a room for improvement. And more generally, we consider that reinforcing our capacities and capabilities at the NIS2 directive provides us the opportunity is very important and essential at the EU level. And at the NC, we consider that now the EU level is the most, let's say, important one to regulate and having this European resilience at the cyber level. Well, this is all to me. If you have any questions, I'd be very glad to answer all the questions, of course. I didn't enter into more detail of the Commission proposal because Benjamin gave an overview, but don't hesitate to ask me questions if you want.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your point of view. And now, Alisha, please, the same two questions. Where do you see the added value, and where would you like to see some adjustments to the NIS2 proposal?
Yes, thank you, Adam, and thank you for inviting me. It's also my first panel in this sort of way, so it's really nice to be here and to speak with all of you. So I studied political science, and as Adam rightly said, I worked in Dutch Parliament before. But to be honest, when I came to Brussels, I didn't know a lot about EU legislation. So let me maybe first recap a little bit how it works. You have the European Commission who brings the proposal. And they really look at the point of view from the union-wide. Then the Council, that now is represented by Muriel, they really look at the different states of the 27 member states, and they have to find one position that all member states enjoy. Then you have European Parliament, who looks at it much more from a political way. So you have different political groups, and together we have to find a position that represents the whole of Parliament. And when a proposal of the Commission comes to the Parliament, a political group gets the rapporteurship. And this means that this group leads the whole file and does the negotiations within Parliament, and afterwards goes into negotiations with the European Commission and with the European Council. And Renew Europe, it's the Liberal Party, they got the NIS2 file. And then afterwards you look within the group who is going to be the rapporteur. And within my group, my boss, he was a cybersecurity expert at the Ministry of Defense. They thought, well, it's quite smart to give the cybersecurity expert this file. So this now also means that I am working all my time at cybersecurity, and I am no cybersecurity expert. I guess Muriel and Benjamin know more, but it is a really interesting field to be in, and I'm really enjoying the NIS2 so far. So this is how the process works. And what we're doing at the moment is getting to a position that all political groups can agree upon. And we will vote, for example, at the end of October and see whether we can find one compromise. So what we're doing now all the time is compromising and negotiating within the political groups to come to a position. Luckily, it's not too difficult, because all groups actually think that the NIS2 proposal of the Commission is quite good. We see there's a lot of problems. Well, as Benjamin said, the NIS1 was good, but it is already old after 5 years, and we need to see how we can improve. So everyone sees the need for it. And we see all the level of threats rising each day, so we need to up our game on cybersecurity. So everyone agrees on this. And there are a couple of things that we all like from the European Parliament side. And we also like its overall ambition, so the bigger scope. And the French like it as well, but there are some member states who think the scope is way too big. But we as European Parliament say, well done, Commission, we agree. We also really like the fact, for example, that public administrations are also inside the scope. We also really like the framework that the Commission has proposed for cooperation between member states, within member states, and within the CSIRTs and all the competent authorities. We're really happy with this. And the thing we perhaps like most is that the NIS2 brings cybersecurity to the boardroom. So it is now up to the management. It's not only the CISO that has to deal with mass cybersecurity. You as the manager, you also have to know what cybersecurity is, and you need to make full responsibilities. My boss always likes to call it chefsache, so let me say that word here as well. But there are also 3 issues that we have a little bit more difficulties with the European Commission, and I've been discussing this a lot with Benjamin, so it will not be new to him. But I guess it's for you interesting to hear where Parliament thinks differently than the Commission itself. And the first point that we are going to make in our position is that the Commission introduced the mandatory reporting of incidents, but also mandatory reporting of significant cyber threats. And what we say is, yes, we think it's very important to report incidents, but threats in the cybersecurity world really is something else. Because when, as a company, do you know that a cyber threat is significant? What is the threshold? Because there has not been an impact. So it's very difficult for you to determine, was it a significant threat, yes or no? And do you have to do all the things that belong to the reporting afterwards? So for example, some entities, they have more than hundreds of threats each week, or some maybe even more. And every phishing email is potentially a significant cyber threat, but only if it's being clicked upon by the wrong person at the wrong time. So for entities, it can be so much administrative burden to have to notify each threat. So we say yes to threat reporting, but this should be done voluntary, and it should be left to the experts to decide which ones are so important to share with the CSIRT and which one not. So to also have in mind what the administrative burden of entities and organizations will be when they come in the scope. So that is one point. Another issue that we have, Benjamin also pointed it out, is the reporting timeline. The Commission has proposed to say every significant incident needs to be reported within 24 hours. And we actually said, as the rapporteur said in his draft report, well, 24 hours is actually much too soon for many companies. An incident, often you do not know what the significance is within 24 hours, how many people have been touched, what data has been compromised. It really allows some research, and especially for entities that are maybe not too big and are new to cybersecurity, to have them to be able to report within 24 hours and also give actionable advice to the CSIRT, what the CSIRT can do something with, it's quite difficult. So what we said, okay, let's now put it to 72 hours and align it with, for example, GDPR, where the GDPR on data breaches has 72 hours timeline. But the Commission says, and the Commission has also been lobbying with some political groups, they say, no, we shouldn't do 72 hours, we should keep it at 24 because we need the situational awareness. It's important to know soon what incidents are going on. And we also agree with that. So we were looking for a compromise, and what we now proposing as European Parliament is say, well, we look at the CIA triad, and so incidents can be divided into 3 categories. You have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. For confidentiality and integrity, you really breach data. And we say, well, these ones are quite difficult to research, and it really takes some time for you to find out what has exactly happened. So these should be done within 72 hours. But on the other hand, there is incidents that touch your availability. which means you cannot deliver your service. And as an essential and important entity, if you cannot deliver your service, so for example, you're an energy provider and you cannot deliver electricity to the citizens, well, it's quite easy to say that that is quite significant. So these kind of incidents need to be reported in 24 hours. So this is the idea that the European Parliament will propose. Then the last issue that I would like to raise is about DNS services and TLD registries. I'm not sure how detailed this is, but let me try to explain a little bit. The Commission is proposing that we are going to regulate these entities, so the people who are behind the domain name services. And we actually really like that. After the GDPR, we lost who is data, and these kind of, so who owns the internet domain names and all these kind of things, it all disappeared. And this really is difficult for the police to have law and order, but also for cybersecurity researchers. If they find that a internet site has malware on it and they cannot tell the person behind the domain name because the data is not available, that really is an issue. So we really like the proposal that the Commission has made there, and we are improving on it. But what we didn't like is that the Commission also tried to regulate the root servers, so the people that really are behind the internet. So there are 13 root servers who are the core of the internet. And we always, as Europe, say to China and Russia, like, we really don't want you to regulate these root servers, the core of the internet. And then the Commission is trying to do it. So what we say, no, let's not do that. Keep the root servers out of the scope. And that is a strong position of the European Parliament. On the other side, so we say root servers out of the scope, but what we would like in the scope, for example, are research and academic institutions, because we feel that they also need to support, and the measures need to be taken, and the support by CSIRTs. So these are three issues that we differ from the Commission. We, of course, so after the European Parliament has voted on its own position, and the Council has gotten to an agreement within 27 member states as well, the three institutions, they go into trialogue, and that's what we call it in Brussels. And in this trialogue, we're trying to come up with, well, a new proposal where all the three institutions like, and then hopefully afterwards we can come to re-vote in Council and in the Parliament, and then afterwards it goes back to the member states to make sure that it gets right into law. So hopefully I explained a little bit about the Parliament's position, and of course open to answer all kinds of questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your insights into the EU legislative process as well. I think that that was useful too. Now I would like to give the opportunity to ask the question to the audience. I cannot see Slido here. I just need to ask my colleague to unlock the device. Okay, first question I can see here is, will the states have the capabilities to regulate and provide services to such a higher number of entities? Shouldn't we focus on the most important ones instead? I think that some words were said about this. But please, if you can share your insights on this, why should we actually regulate more entities at this scale, and what benefit does it have? Or do you think that we are ready for this switch? You know, because my perception of this is that till now it was more about regulating, critical entities, and provide them more services and to really, you know, communicate them on a not daily basis, but a lot. And now that should change, and we should regulate also entities that we wouldn't be able to contact that often, and it would be, you know, much more up to them how will they struggle with those issues. Please, Benjamin, first your insight on this shift. How do you see that from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much, Adam. So as I've already said in the beginning, we understand, of course, that this huge expansion of scope is a challenge for the member states, and it will be difficult for them to supervise all the entities. But I don't think it's a good argument to say just because it's a challenge, we shouldn't do it. Because the cybersecurity threats, they are simply there. We cannot ignore them. We know that many of the companies that are only medium in size, or also large companies that are currently not under scope, they are often, you know, they are attacked by cyber criminals, and they do face cybersecurity threats. And cybersecurity is a very specific field. We know that those entities that are protected the least, they can often pass on the threats to the other entities that are doing a proper job. So what we need to make sure is that everyone is doing a proper job. Now, we know, of course, as I said, it's a challenge for the member states, and we don't expect member states to supervise all the entities under the new scope in the same manner. So in our proposal, we allow member states to prioritize, to supervise, and have closer relationships with those entities that they deem more important or more essential, and to maybe do less regular auditing and checkups on those entities that they find to be a little bit less important. So we don't really see a problem. Also, if you compare it with other fields of law, for example, we don't say, no one would ever say, let's focus the tax regime on those companies where we can annually check up if they actually do pay the taxes properly. No, we ask everyone to pay taxes, even if we cannot check every company every year. And that's also because we simply expect that companies fulfill, at least for the most part, the requirements without regular checks. So, and it's the same in the cybersecurity field. Even if you cannot check up on a company every single year, we still expect that most honest and serious companies will put something in place and will take measures. So that's why we think that even if you have to prioritize supervision and you cannot check up on every company every single year, it will the new measures will still lead to an improvement in cybersecurity overall.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Muriel, you shared your insights on how France wants to deal with this, with the more cooperation with private sector. But can you, tell what is the actual idea of the, cooperation, or maybe leaving that burden more on private sector, and how would you ensure that it would work, in the practice?
There is a lot to say, actually. Maybe first, if I may, to come back a little bit on NIS1 directive. The idea at first was to securize specific services, the most essential ones for like critical entities. We saw that it was a good idea at first, but sometimes you have entities that don't want to play the game, and that they are not willing to secure and invest in securing this specific essential services information system. So we think that even though it was a good idea at first, we need to change our mind and our set of think on how we can securize an entity. This is the first one. Of course, there is entities that play the game and invest and so on, but we have also other part of the entities that doesn't want to play the game because, of course, it's expensive. But when you are attacked after that, this is more expensive. So this is one of the first points I wanted to raise, and which will be the difference with the NIS2 directive, because now we consider that the threat doesn't target exclusively the most essential information system, but all the chain of information system. Let's say there is the software problem, the management administration problem. There is an amount of door that the attackers can enter now, and this is very important to have this broader consideration when you think to securize an entity. Now, what we can say also that this is not new for certain entities. With the NIS1 directive, national competent authorities from member states targeted some and an amount also of entities that are also targeting in the NIS2 directive. So there will be an amount of entities that are already under the scope of the NIS directive and the national transposition law. So it won't be something new. There is some investment that are already in place, and this is just continuing to invest in securing the system. So it won't be something new for the most critical on entities, if we can explain it like that. Of course, we understand that there will be a number of entities new to the system. We will need to accompany them. So on our side, we are now working on how we can transpose the directive and how we can accompany those specific entities that doesn't even know how cybersecurity is, how it works, how we can do, etc. So there will be a work to explain the cybersecurity hygiene measures. We will provide some guidance. We will also, as we said, try to have some trainings, if we can say like that, of private sector also to have a demultiplicate effect on the power of the national entity. The idea is to give tools for the private sector to explain them how to do so in an effective manner and in a proportionate manner also, because you cannot ask for small entities, for example, medium entities that doesn't know nothing in cybersecurity to invest the same amount for the most critical and large one. Of course, this is something very different. So we need to have this kind of tailored approach at the national level to accompany them. This is for the last maybe word I can say. This is something that our Director General say every time in the conferences, but now the cybersecurity is no longer a political and the national authority business. This is something that tackle every sector in the society, and the private sector need to get on the train now and help us to do our job, because if they are doing their job to securize themselves, we can better help them to when there will be an attack also, because there is like practical also and technical work to do, and when they are calling us and notify incidents and that we have to provide some guidance and help to tackle a situation and handle the situation after that. We need to see what is going on the entity. What is your planning system? How it works? What did you put in line, etc. So we need to have this comprehensive approach also, and we can help them if they have something already in place also, because otherwise they will lose everything. They will lose money, they will lose data, they will lose a lot of information crucial for their activity also. So this is something that again, our directors say that cybersecurity now is no longer the unique property of the state. This is a null government and economical approach. And this is, well, how we see we can go through the NIS2 directive. We are well aware that it will be complicating, but we will have 4 years to implement it also before NIS3 directive. So we have to keep in mind that this progressive approach, the supervision, we won't let all the private sector down like that, but we will need to count on them as they can count on us also.
Okay, thank you. Alisha, do you have any secret sauce for the implementation of the NIS with the scope enlarged?
Yeah, I think I said it. I think I like both answers really much. I said it in the beginning as well, that the European Parliament is actually quite in favor of having this large scope. But I know as well that, for example, as the Czech position, that it's a little bit too big. So, of course, we also see that side of the story, that the CSIRTs have to deal with so many entities. But I tend to agree with Muriel there. If we look, for example, at the difference in cybersecurity investments with the US, Europe spends 40% less on cybersecurity. And we really want to make this larger. And that's why we want to bring more entities in the scope. And that makes it more difficult for CSIRTs because there's much more entities that you have to keep in mind. But we also think, well, maybe the CSIRT should also think about how to improve our own work. How can we automate kind of some sort of things? How can we innovate? How can we, indeed, Muriel, help with the private sector? How can we work together? So we understand the question marks raised by some of the national CSIRTs and that there is much to do, but we also think there is ways to improve in this. So we would actually say the scope as it is right now is good for us.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. And I see another question. I will link 2 questions in Slido actually that are concerned related to the legal basis of the NIS directive, which is internal market, and the clash with the national security, because some member states, including us, consider cybersecurity as a part of national security, and the NIS directive is based on the internal market. So my question is, where is the boundary, or is there any, and do you have any ideas for the definition of where the internal market ends and where the national security starts, and why? And please try to keep it short, because I have many other interesting questions which I would like to ask, at least a few of them. So please, Benjamin.
So thanks a lot. I mean, we agree, of course, that cybersecurity has a lot to do with national security, but it does also have a lot to do with the internal market. If we don't protect our companies well, this will have an impact on our economy and on the functioning of the market. Just to give you one example, there was recently a huge incident affecting a supermarket chain in Sweden, and the incident resulted in this supermarket chain closing all its stores over the weekend. So all throughout Sweden, customers were unable to go to the supermarket. In some towns, this was the only supermarket in the town. So in those towns, it was basically over the weekend not possible to buy food. And I mean, this is clearly internal market and about the economy, the resilience of our companies, and the ability of our consumers to purchase products. So I would say this goes far beyond just national security. This is internal market, and this is why the Commission has, in my opinion, rightly chosen an internal market legal base for making our proposal. We do, of course, recognize that there are boundaries. So we have included public administration in the scope, but our proposal says that we are only including public administration where it is relevant for the internal market. So we are not including any public administration that has no connection to the internal market. And we are also saying very clearly that we do respect national competences on national security. And yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Muriel?
Well, if I had to be short, and I will be. Well, first, NIS2, as I said before, is much more like a cybersecurity mass law. You have to counter all the ransomware, all the cyber criminality, etc. So NIS2 directive is here to give tools and to provide tools to entities to enhance their cybersecurity resilience. On the other hand, the strategic threat remains the competence of the member states. So NIS2 directive isn't here to tackle the strategic threat. We've got cybersecurity strategies at the national level to handle this kind of threat. As you may know, in France, we have also another national law that allows us to do a little bit more and to be more specific with the most critical entities in our members, in our national state. But we consider that NIS2 is doing something for the large-scale threat, let's say, and member states have the possibility to tackle the strategic one. And it's short, but it is more or less how we see the difference between the NIS2 directive and how we can handle this kind of threat at the national level.
Okay, thank you. And Alisha, your comment on this?
Yeah, the only thing that I can add is that the NIS, of course, wants to make sure that you set a bare minimum, so that if you are in the Netherlands, as I am, and for example, Germany doesn't have any minimum cybersecurity rules at all, a criminal or ransomware or malware doesn't stop at the border. So we are all profiting when we have set a minimum that we all agree upon. So that's why I would think the internal market here is rightly done so by the Commission.
Okay, thank you. Then I have a question here. What target day EU countries have to complete the NIS2 implementation? That's the most liked one, actually. And there is no date, I can say, because the NIS2 is currently drafted, so it's not that we have the NIS2 already in place, but there are discussions between the European Council, European Parliament, and the European Commission. After this process, then we will have some date until when the member states will have to implement the NIS2 transpose. I think that it's 18 months, right, Benjamin? Yes, and that is also for discussion, so we actually don't know yet. The next question, what are the sanctions in case of non-compliance? Please, Benjamin, if you can quickly comment on sanctions.
Yeah, sanctions is actually a very important topic under the revision. I've mentioned earlier that we are trying to also tackle problems that we've identified with the first NIS directive. And one of those problems is that the sanctions that member states have put in law in their national implementations of the NIS1 directive are very different. And on top, we've also noticed that the sanctions are not used a lot as a tool so far. I mean, we're not saying that in the future every company should be sanctioned for every small digression, but we do want, of course, that companies that really refuse to cooperate and that don't put any measures in place, that they can also face fines as an incentive to make sure that they actually do something. So, and we've tried to align the sanction regime as much as possible with EU data protection rules, so the general data protection regulation. And the sanctions that we propose is to have the possibility of a sanction of up to 2% of the total worldwide annual turnover of a company, or a maximum that member states put in their national laws, a maximum of at least 10 million euros. So either one of those two. And in addition to that, we also propose the possibility to have a managerial ban on companies that don't fulfill the requirements.
Okay, thank you. I think that is okay. And to answer this question in this way. And another question is to Alisha. You mentioned regulation of services like DNS or root servers. This is, however, regulated by ICANN, which is outside EU. How would you enforce it? I think that's an interesting question. I think that Benjamin maybe will also comment on this. But please, Alisha, how do you see this?
Yeah, it's actually a very good question, and it's very much true. So the Commission, but also us, are in regular contact with ICANN to see what can we do, how can we work together. So the problem first was that the WHOIS data was there according to rules by ICANN. But after the GDPR, so the data protection came into place, ICANN and the whole community were a little bit afraid because they were like, well, we cannot share this information anymore because it is data protected. So ICANN also saw the problem, and they actually, I think, Benjamin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I actually think they went to the Commission and said, well, there's something needs to be done to fix this problem. So that's why Europe now comes with this legislation and saying that, well, these DNS services and utility registries, they need to make sure that they have the information and that they have the contact details so that people can, for example, the police or cybersecurity people can contact the person behind a domain name. So actually it was also from their side that they said, well, there is this problem and we need to fix it. So I think ICANN is actually quite happy that we are introducing this, although they might see some problems here and there, but that is something that we need to solve together.
Okay, Benjamin, would you like to?
Yeah, actually, I have nothing to add to that. That was a perfect response. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Alisha.
Perfect. I will have one last question, if it is okay, and then we will have the coffee break. Do you have any idea how to approach regulation of companies outside EU that are part of a supply chain? As one of the goals is to focus on that area. Muriel, you already mentioned supply chain is important for you. What do you think about regulating entities outside EU as a part of a supply chain?
Well, in this question, I see two possibilities. First, this is not... we want to regulate actors that doesn't provide services within the EU. The idea is to have a clear vision on services that are provided in the EU first. So for the other one, we can let them apart. And well, there is a dedicated article for this kind of entities and actors. Of course, this is something a little bit complicated, and I think we cannot enter into more detail now because as the negotiations are ongoing within the Council, I think that there is some reflection that has been raised, but as the perimeter, as the scope is the first main issue for now, we will have the opportunity to discuss a little bit more the other issue we had. But the idea is the Commission proposal suggests that we need to have and we need to be aware of which are the companies that provide services within the EU, and having a point of contact that we can poke if there is any problem and issue that or incident that intervene if there is a problem. So we think that this is something very important, of course, but we think that there is a room for improvement on this specific dedicated article, of course. We don't know yet how we can improve it because, of course, it is very complicated to have a good awareness of which will be the point of contact, how we can communicate between member states and also this point of contact. So this is fine-tuning that we will have to do between member states. But of course, we think that this is very important also to capture and to have the possibility to contact this person if there is any issue and any incident that will have repercussion on the European Union.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. Outside EU companies and the NIS supply chain regulation, or maybe say approach, how to reach the companies outside EU. What is your idea?
Supply chain security is actually a very important aspect of our proposal. First of all, I would like to explain that this directive, it will not just apply to companies that are European or that are headquartered in Europe, but it will apply to all companies that provide services in the sectors that we propose inside the EU. So if I'm a manufacturer from outside the EU, but I provide services within the European Union, then I fall under the scope, and then I, as the company, as the manufacturer, I have to take cybersecurity measures and I have to report incidents. In addition to that, we are also requiring all companies under the scope to look at their own supply chain. So if I am procuring important products that I need for my own manufacturing process, or if I am subscribing to a cloud service provider, I need to check up on that company and I need to make sure that they are doing a proper job on cybersecurity as well. And lastly, as Muriel has already mentioned, we are trying to codify or put into law a process that we first seen a couple of years ago with 5G. So when everyone became aware of the challenges surrounding 5G security, the member states, they sat down together voluntarily and they decided to come up with joint recommendations that all member states would put in place to improve the level of security in the 5G supply chain. So this process, we want to be able to replicate it in the future, and we are proposing with our law to exactly do that.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And Alisha.
Yeah, maybe a very small addition that what we hear from industry. So, for example, there are a lot of medium-sized and also small entities that will come into the scope of the NIS, and they have a little bit of fear because they say, well, we see that we need to have supply chain security, but how can we be 100% sure that our supply chain is right? We don't have the power to go to, I don't know, an Apple or a Huawei and say, well, you need to make sure that you have cybersecurity measures in place. So the supply chain security is a difficult issue for smaller companies, and we really get that. But we also stand behind the Commission and say, well, we don't ask you to have a 100% secure supply chain, but we do ask you to take a risk assessment and see where your problems are, and also to try for example, in contracts, see whether you both can come up with solutions on how to improve cybersecurity. So we understand that there is a little bit of issue there for entities and for organizations, and so it's a lot of us to ask, but we also see that the supply chain is really important here. So we should try to improve as much as possible there.
Okay, thank you for your answer, and thank you for being with us, for your time. We are a bit behind the schedule, so thank you very much for being here, Benjamin, Muriel, and Alisha. And I will hand over to my colleague, and then we will have a coffee break. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin, Muriel, Adam, for the good conversation.
Yeah, thank you too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.